All right, so it is 7:02, and we'll call the Town Government Study Committee meeting to order. It is a virtual meeting and it is being recorded. First up, public comment. I see no public, but we'll welcome any public comment. Twice, 3 times. Shoot, good. I sent out the minutes previously from the public forum and the November 4th meeting. I entertain a motion to approve.
I had one recommended change. Do I need to make the motion first?
No, you can make,
Okay. On the November 4th one, down towards the bottom, so 4th bullet from the bottom, Ms. Alexander recommended using some of the presentation prepared for the forum in the report. I think I would just add, since the entire committee had signed off on it, like that.
Sure.
Which is, yeah, just to save time since we've already agreed on that content.
Roger?
I had one suggested edit on each set of minutes. On the October 21st minutes, in the brief introduction section, there was a reference to the SBS. I think that should just be the SB for select board.
I'm just looking for it.
Yes, got it. Thank you.
And then on the November 4th minutes, in the non-binding straw poll vote to increase the board from 3 to 5, it doesn't look like Pat's vote or inclination was captured.
Yeah, I actually noted that as well. Thank you very much. Yes, and I voted in favor of moving to 5.
I've got that. Thank you.
Thanks for catching that, Roger. I had actually noted it, but
With those edits, I will move that the committee approve the minutes of October 21st and November 4th, 2021.
Second.
excellent. Mike? Kirsten?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
Deirdre?
Aye.
Pat Woodall and I as well. Minutes are approved. Excellent. Item 4, 3 versus 5, continued deliberation. Harriet sent me an email today. She will be here later tonight. And it was a draft of what she anticipates to be the minority report, which is in the drafts folder, titled HD_report_today's date. To read it. One, continuing the 3 to 5 debate, one point that I don't think was made last week was typically a 5-member select board is considered to be more of a policy-making board as opposed to a day-to-day operations board, but is paired with a strong TA, a TA that has the ability to hire and fire to the department head level, and has the ability to sign contracts and enter grant agreements, as long as not financially constricting on the town. A 3-member select board typically is more involved in the day-to-day management of the town, and the TA requires approval for just about everything. I consider, and some of the research considers as well, a 5-member board is more like a corporate structure where the 5-member board is more like a board of directors, and the town administrator, town manager is more like a CEO or CAO in this case.
Or COO,
Or COO, yes.
Chief Operating Officer, I think would, in my mind, would be the best analogy.
Yeah.
I mean, and in Wenham's case, particularly because of the strong tradition of policy being set by the select board.
So I that was my the piece that I believe that was not discussed last week, and that I do feel why I'm strongly in favor of moving to a 5-member board. Mike?
So, Patrick, in your mind, then, if the majority view of the committee is to go for 5, you take that as a package with, oh yeah, and we'll also recommend a strong town administrator, either changing the description of the guy we got or the next time around. Are these a package for you? Because it's beyond our charge.
I would like it to be a package, but it is beyond our charge. Another thing I would like to see is this committee continued to take up those issues, whether it's the same constitution or completely new members, because I think the conversations have started, and I think that's the next natural step that a committee like this could take on. I also think we should take up appointed versus elected positions. I truly think that we might be better served with appointed positions, even though we have a very good town clerk, and we had we did have a very good town clerk as well, but there's no guarantee. But again, these are outside of our purview. But and given the fact that if we go to town meeting and 5 is approved, most likely this committee dissolves. And my guess would be to take another 2 or 3 years to even reform.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, it almost sounds like you're describing a citizens review committee with an unending mandate to keep an eye on the government of Wenham. I don't subscribe to that at all. We have a limited charge, do our job, finish. We are finished at next town meeting, barring some big.
I want to suggest that an option. I personally believe that 5 is responsible when joined with a town administrator who has operating authority. I mean, and as I've said many times, that was the outcome of the 2012 study committee. It is available to those here supporting 5 to say we support 5, a move to 5, provided the town administrator is given operational authority, so that, Patrick, just what you said is right. We change this board of 5 from the hands of the people who open town hall and close town hall to a policy-making board, a long-range planning group, a group who deals with the tough political issues, but the day-to-day, pay the staff, hire the staff, plow the snow, take away the leaves, all that stuff. You simply, the selectmen, the select board sees to it that whoever's in that chair, the chair has that authority, and whoever's in that chair is doing an adequate job or not. And so if you paired those two things together, notwithstanding Mike's point that it's not our charge, the selectmen are going to have to deal with it. That is the recommendation. And so, and if the committee would like to have it sent to town meeting with that condition in it, then, yes, there'd be work to be done after such a vote. But, I don't regard it as quite as daunting a task, frankly, precisely because a lot of work's been done on it in the past.
With the report that can't be found these days. But anyway, Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of how that shift could happen, is it something that would have to be voted on by town meeting? Is it something that the select board themselves could say, we are going to designate these responsibilities to our town administrator? I don't know. Like,
There's a
what-
statute, Kirsten, there's a statute, and there are two statutes. I think there's a town manager one and town administrator one. And it's one of those forms that says, in a town which accepts this section, there shall be an officer called the town administrator. And anyway, the opportunity exists in that context to define the ex officio authority of that office, so that and that's a warrant article. It would be, I think, because it's accepting a state statute, it may not even require, it may not be a bylaw, may not be an attorney general review. It's an option that it exists for towns who want to do it. And I've had discussions, but never got to the point where I attempted to draft it. But I will tell you that the job description that Peter Lombardi came in with was effectively intended by me as the draftsman of it to in effect be as close as we could get to the ex officio authority, given that we couldn't get Jack Wilhelm to part with any power at all. But it was designed to say, well, unless we vote differently, you may do these things. So in my view, there is a document that comes pretty close to giving operational, day-to-day operating authority to the TA.
Okay.
Deirdre, go ahead.
So one, I have to agree with Mike that this is outside of our scope. And secondly, I would also say that if this is an issue that people think should be in the report and in the discussion or something, we have not done adequate research to be able to speak to this. I'm not comfortable that we've done adequate research. I would like to see that 2012 report, Paul, because I think it would be helpful, but we've not reviewed that. We've not looked at the town administrator job description that exists. We've not interviewed the current select board for what their perception of the powers is. And I heard Ryan say at a prior meeting that often the TA town manager job is what the select board at the time wants it to be. So I think without doing, and Ryan, you can correct me if I heard that wrong, but that's my recollection. I think we have not done due diligence to actually make a statement about this issue.
I would disagree with you in the sense that what you said at the end is the last thing you said is the thing you have now. The town administrator has whatever authority the selectmen choose to let them delegate and don't overrule. But the logic, the tension between the authority of the town administrator and the role of the board of selectmen is so totally intertwined in my view. I think that it is simply about the case. It's as simple as this. Do you want 5 selectmen in charge of every decision that the town makes? Or do you want a professional town manager to have authority to make the operating decisions under long-term guidance from the select board? I mean, but the research that I've seen, I don't know, I forget the statistics, but it's relatively unusual for there to be a 5-person board and not a professional person with ex officio authority. So I don't think you need to understand everything there is about the differences between this kind of town administrator and another. It is that operating authority should rest with that professional, and it therefore changes the responsibility of the select board and makes it a more appropriate accountability for.
But I actually looked at the general, sorry, Mike was first.
No, I'm just going to agree with you, Deidre, and also Paul. I think there's a sense in this discussion, very important one, that these two things are linked. And indeed, it may be something we want to talk about and ask via our chair that we go to the Board of Selectmen and say, these two issues are so totally linked. We need you to accommodate an expanded dialogue on the subject, i.e. amend our charge, because the two may be essentially bound together.
Roger, just one second. I I have discussed this. There doesn't seem to be an appetite, and that's why I say it may take 2 or 3 more years to do this. I don't want to link the two because I don't think they necessarily have to be linked. And again, the TATM is outside of our purview. There is another way to continue this, and that would be through a citizen's petition to make this a permanent committee and subject to its own agenda and its own charge. But that's not on the table at this point. But
one step at a time.
Yeah, and I think the 3 to 5 is a first step, and then hopefully continue on. Go ahead, Roger.
Oh, I think the link, whether inextricable or not, and I think whether one views it as inextricable is probably a personal opinion, both of committee members and of the public at large. But I think that link could, and this is kind of to Paul's point, be a reason why someone might recommend against an expansion. They might say, I personally recommend against an expansion unless XYZ other changes to the government structure happen. Or it might be something where someone says, I recommend that the select board expand and also XYZ happen. So I know that our charge does not specifically ask us to address this issue, but I think if an individual committee member feels that there is an inextricable link, then that I don't think anyone else on the committee can tell that person otherwise.
Kirsten?
So one of the things this brings up for me is that, we're going into a master planning process, and, I would think that discussion about, do we want to be moving towards a more professional management of the town, like town clerk jobs have become a lot more complicated and more professionalized, and more towns are going to appointed town clerks versus an elected one where the person has to live in town, and in a very small town, there aren't that many people who have gone through the training to be a town clerk. So your options are fairly limited in the best scenario, or you get someone who has no training at all and is learning on the job. So, that part, and then this whole discussion about town administrator versus town manager, we can look to Hamilton as an example of a town manager and a town that moved from 3 to 5 in the somewhat recent past. But I think that's a larger town discussion about where we are and how towns are run these days and how we want to be run in the future. And we haven't had a master plan since the 1960s, I believe. So I think this is a great thing to be discussing there, but maybe what happens now is that we're in a transition period moving towards that. But I wouldn't want to be waiting, another 5 years to have that conversation, since we're not the fastest moving town around.
It's an intentionally slow process. Government is intentionally slow. But you bring up the master plan, and that's a great point, where this is somewhere where that issue could be addressed, as well as by us if we're a part of our charge. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, the master plan, it could say that either we're fine where we are, or we should vest more authority in our town administrator.
And, to be the devil's advocate against my own earlier point, what is to stop us from commenting in any way we feel as a committee? Yes, let's say that the majority track is go for 5. And while you're going for 5, you ought to, subject to further study and all, you should very seriously consider a stronger TA town manager. There's nothing to prevent this TGSC from stating that in the ultimate report.
Right.
The select board can disregard it, the townsfolk can disregard it, but there's nothing that prevents us from saying it, I don't think. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's correct.
No,
both
I think
agree.
that's a great idea. I think that's a great point, Mike. And it goes to a larger point that I think regardless of what side of the recommendation you fall on, or if, like me, you're going to abstain for various reasons, I think we need to make clear that this decision doesn't exist in a vacuum. And there are other pieces, whether it's the town administrator, whether it's other aspects of town governance that play, that this decision is a piece of a puzzle in that sense. And if there are aspects, of the town government that may be impacted that are outside our charge, but we think that the townspeople should be aware of that, then we can, I think, put that in our report.
Yeah, certainly compensation of the select board and the whole benefits thing that Patrick has turned up is one, and it may well be good to identify. There have been a handful of issues. Those are the two that immediately come to mind that could be noted in the report. I kind of think that the report is to the citizens as a whole, but need not necessarily be the definitive action. It's really the selectmen's responsibility to respond to town meeting. They could preemptively respond by addressing one or more of these issues, particularly the compensation one, if they wanted to sort of clarify that for townspeople. Because the money there would probably be dispositive for a lot of people how they would vote. Said, I'm fine with 5, but not if we have to pay them all $27,000. So I think making sure that there are these peripheral or interconnected issues that are not our charge, but we've discussed to the extent that realize that they're intertwined, and that the selectmen would be advised to consider the stuff as a package and figure out how to get everything in a point of balance, so that if you pull a lever to make this change, the other changes, or at least the preliminary changes, are made so the whole thing works ex post facto.
And I just wanted to let you know that Ryan did send me an email today, this evening, from 2002, the Board of Selectmen minutes, where the eligibility for insurance was taken up. And I will post it to our website, but I need to look into whether it's still in effect and if it's in the town policies, but it did exclude employees from benefits unless they worked more than 20 hours a week. It does not specifically call it does say volunteers and paid or unpaid elected or appointed officials shall not be eligible for insurance or other benefits. So that may still be on the books. And Ryan is following up with town council. We'll see if it is in effect as right now.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, we just found out today, so we'll pass that along and see, again, determine its relevance, which I think it should be still pertinent. But I plan to follow up with town council about that tonight.
That's great.
So just along this town administrator, town manager thing, we talked a little bit at the last meeting about the turnover that we've had, and there was some thought that, well, we're never going to be able to keep someone for a long time. We don't pay them enough. It's, we're just a small potatoes compared to the other fabulous town manager jobs out there. But I think that I'd like to question that, and I think some further study is worth doing to talk to people who are in the field and say, what is it that would make this job more appealing for a longer term? Would a town manager versus town administrator have more appeal? Is it the salary? Is it, the size of the town? What is it? Because if we want our town to be managed well, more continuity is really important. Just cycling through staff, particularly at the very top, so frequently it's just hard to move forward. particularly when you're trying to execute a master plan or something. So it just, that I think is something that's worth mentioning as a possibility to the town. And the second thing is just to remind everyone that it's not selectmen anymore, it's the Board of Select, and just to be careful about our language. Thank you.
I was citing a document from 2002, which is the Board of Selectmen. It is now the Select Board. Yes, you're absolutely correct.
Curious, for what it's worth, at the time of the 2012 Town Government Study Committee, this whole issue of how to make the position attractive, and in my recollection, that we interviewed a number of people, maybe recruiters and other people, and I think it was a fairly clear preference of people for positions with actual authority of the office, that they didn't have to, as it were, beg or worry about other than their annual review. They knew what they were responsible for and they could carry it out in the way they wanted. And that's a more fulfilling thing than potentially being second guessed over everything. So, I mean, I think it improves the odds. It may well be that Wenham is still small enough, can't pay enough to get a great person for 20 years, but it would be wonderful if that could happen.
Although I don't, I'm not in the position, but I don't think the pay should be a huge issue. Hamilton has a town manager. We have a town administrator. The difference is pay is $10,000. Maybe that is very significant. I don't know. But if we had a town manager, would we be 10,000 higher? I don't know. But I know that we tend to be on the low end of the pay scale in the region. I think across the board.
Well, and certainly the turnover costs us more than $10,000.
Yes.
Every time we have to do a whole recruiting thing, it's just time and energy and money.
And I know where to find $10,000, but in the town budget.
But Ryan's going to stay for 20 years, so we're
Yes,
okay.
please.
There you go. And you can make the case that the strong town manager makes sense whether it's 3 or 5. And we need to be competitive in the marketplace to get good people, and you have to recognize that. But the fundamentals of running the town properly, the select board for policy and the town manager, if you will, to run things.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike, because, and this loops back to where Patrick started this discussion, which is having a select board that operates more like a board of directors rather than, hands-on operational management. You could conceivably, depending on what size organization and operation you have a 3-person board of directors. That might be entirely appropriate for certain, entities. It's all a matter of the way in which the board chooses to operate, or if appropriate, is designated to operate under the bylaws. So while it's a consideration, I don't think it's determinative that if you want a policy making board with a stronger administrator, that you need to have a 5-member board. It does seem to be the commonplace, but it's an observation that's worth noting.
I do think we have.
It looks like she disagrees.
I think we have a couple of recent examples of the select board being more a day-to-day board, which may have really hurt the town. One being the cell tower at Iron Rail, the library staff unionizing recently. And there was also a movement to put solar panels on the roof of the library, which then got bogged down in the select board.
Right, but my point in that, Patrick, is that the size of the select board isn't necessarily the issue in that case. It's the function and structure, not in a size component, but in the manner of operating. So if you had theoretically, if you had a 3-member select board that had designated or delegated its day-to-day authority to an administrator and said, we are going to be a advisory policy driven board, then that, whether it was 3 or 5 wouldn't necessarily make a difference. That was just the point that I was kind of taking Mike's thought and running with.
Yep. Hey, Kirsten.
Yeah, I think, just I was saying with town clerk, the function of town government has gotten infinitely more complicated since Wenham was founded as a town separate from Salem, and having someone who is professionally trained doing the day-to-day stuff makes a whole lot of sense to me, because we don't have anyone on our select boards who's been trained as a town administrator. So, they're kind of learning on the job. And then you can run into issues. So, I think, again, like, more discussion about the professionalization of our town management makes, and putting power into the hands of people who have been professionally trained makes a lot of sense to me, having that discussion.
I mean, I guess I just want to say, I think we do have professionals who are employed by the town. I mean, Brian is a professional. He's an experienced professional. So are some of our previous town administrators. I don't know too many of them, but at least in recent past. So I think, again, I'm just not convinced we've done enough due diligence to have this discussion. And Patrick, I don't know the examples that you're raising. I do think that's important. But without even looking at the job description, looking at the bylaws, I mean, there's a lot of opinion here, but we're not, where's the concreteness? I looked at the Mass General laws, Paul, that you've mentioned numerous times, and I did see the one about town administrator was very clear. The other one that was supposed to be about town managers was not. It didn't even reference, to my recollection, a town manager specifically and a suite of responsibilities. So I just think this isn't crystal clear. And that's not to say that I'm against strengthening the role of the town administrator. I'm not against it at all. I actually think the job description could be clarified and strengthened, but I don't think we have done enough due diligence on this.
I'm not suggesting that we have, and I certainly think our town staff has been very professional. I was talking about our Board of Select is not professional town administrators, and hasn't been trained as a town manager and gone to the many trainings that you would have to have those roles. Because that's a pretty small pool of people out there, as we know how hard it is to attract them. What I'm saying is, I think suggesting in our report that should be further studied and looked at and discussed, and possibly move in that direction. But yeah, it's outside of the purview of this committee. We don't have time if we're going to move ahead. And I think the points that Roger and Mike made about whether it's 3 or 5, this is an important discussion to have for the town. So we can just put that out there for people to look at.
And I would encourage, anyone can contribute to what's going to be the final report. You want to put a page in, by all means. This is not, we want minority, majority, we want voices heard here at this table and at town meeting and with the select board. We did raise these issues in the interim report. This was all raised and kind of left on the table, and it can definitely be raised again. But yeah, yes, I do think right now it's 3 to 5, and that's our charge.
So does that bring us to agenda item 5?
If no one has any other deliberations, sure.
I mean, there will be more deliberation, but
Oh, yeah.
just for purposes of tonight.
So we discussed last week. I sat down and started a preamble and found myself getting too opinionated. So I stopped.
I'm shocked. No.
I've got a few opinions.
Patrick, at this point in time, should I reiterate my offer to take up the introduction preamble for the report?
I think that would be a great idea. I appreciate that, Roger.
No problem.
All right, so we have that taken care of.
Unless anyone else present tonight feels opposed to that, I am happy to take on that part of things.
As the moderator and the abstaining voice, you may be best suited. That would be great. Then we talked about the majority and minority report. Now, of course, we can be in flux. There's no, the straw poll was just that. It was just a straw poll point in time. Votes can change. But as of right now, we are majority go to 5, minority stay at 3. Harriet has put out a document, as I said. It's on the shared drive. You're welcome to read it.
I will be happy to put forward some of the points I made in the previous session that we had. That is a quasi minority view as well. But I also want to underline the fact that respecting the majority, I'd like to see how that the draft of the majority view of why 5 is a benefit, that Wenham, would benefit from going to 5, because one needs to respond. You can make the case for 3, but it's the interface between the two. So, look forward to the continued deliberation, but the sooner we can start rough draft of the straw poll majority view, the better we can complete the whole assignment, it seems to me.
Agreed, and that works in the other way as well, right?
Yes.
So I would agree. Go ahead, Deirdre.
I guess I was a little confused about what Harriet's document is, if that is intended to be the draft minority report, or is this a personal statement? And is that where we're heading, where all of us are going to issue personal statements at the end of the report?
I think Harriet's.
I know she's not here, but
Harriet's thing represented a little bit, as you were saying, a more of a personal venting of things, and I think that a little more dispassionate approach, along the lines of more like Mike's prior writings on this. I mean, it's probably better suited, and I think Mike's point is an excellent one. Is that it as the majority, it is to point out, say we disagree with this, that, or the other point of the majority because, and I think that makes it easier for for the voters to make sense of it. And if Roger's, if you will, preamble sort of really, covers the broader subject of this, which, as I've often said, has an established life in other places that we've looked to for guidance, and we're trying to find out what makes the most sense for Wenham. So I think that builds down to a sign of an absorbable document for the voters.
And I try not to be an editor. If people want things posted, I'm using the draft folder, and initials underscore what it is and underscore date as so we know who wrote something and when it was written. And then once we determine that it is something we want to move forward with, we can move it from the drafts to another folder like the public forum.
Mhm.
So she had problems posting. I encourage, if you've got something you want the committee to see, put it in that drafts folder. And I would encourage people to go in and check it periodically. I don't like emailing the entire committee. But feel free to use the drafts folder, or if you have problems putting something in there, you can send it to me and I will put it in as presented. I usually have to put it in a Word document, but I don't edit.
And to follow up, if I may, follow up Paul's point, I think with respect to Harriet's submission, my sense of it is a commentary on her part about the process and this and that. It is not laid out as a pros and cons for 3 versus 5. Ultimately, to the extent there is a minority report, it would be keyed to the pros and cons, it seems to me.
Right.
But who knows? Maybe the majority will come up with such a marvelous, broad framework that minority goes away. Who knows?
Vice versa.
I would recommend that rather than just using our own personal opinions, that we really go back to the data and try to use both in majority and minority report what people said. Like this fits in with the minority view, this fits in with the majority view, and these were the words of people responding. So it's really not just what we think, it's really what the data showed, because these are people who've been involved with various aspects of the town, and I think have really valuable things to say.
Just want to echo that. That is absolutely key. People are not expecting to look at a document that comes from this committee that's full of, oh, that's Mike going on, or that's Harriet, or that's whoever, whatever. It needs to be the result of a deliberative process, taking account of the data and laying out the pros and cons. I totally agree.
So I would say the report actually needs to include a section on methods, research methods, what we did, and then a summary of the data, then followed by the majority and minority opinions, which ideally would both draw on the data, but that is the opinion section. But there does need to be a section that says what we did, how we did it, and what that information said.
And what about, so we interviewed a number of officials from different towns, and we have their interviews captured. Most came down on one side or the other. I think those names carry weight. The people that submitted those surveys, should we be using their names as well? They did submit to a public interview. And I do think that their names do carry weight, whether it be Wynn Dodge or Sean Farrell or people in town or in surrounding towns.
I may offer a recommendation. This goes for the minority and majority. I would suggest using titular attribution rather than personal attribution. So I think it would be appropriate to say a member of the Groveland Select Board said XYZ, or a former member of the Wenham Select Board said this or that. Just let me finish, Patrick. The raw data will always be available. I don't know. There's some, and I could be convinced otherwise. And obviously, I'm not going to have any authoring of either the minority or the majority report. So the authors and the majority minority groups can ultimately prepare what they prepare. But I just, the singling out of individuals for better or for worse doesn't seem like what the report is supposed to do. That's just my personal view.
I agree. Deirdre, would you be willing to do that part about what we did in the the data collection and,
Yes,
and summarize. Yeah, great. I think you do an awesome job with that.
I think.
I mean, the fact is that if 4 out of 5 former town administrators of Wenham believe that it's a no-brainer to go to 5, that our townsfolk, our voters at town meeting need to know that. Without knowing the names per se, but the titular point that Roger made is 4 out of 5, 7 out of 9, whatever. That's the sort of stuff that resonates with the resident in town who's not paying a lot of attention to this, and then it becomes a bigger deal as we approach town meeting and they're looking around. Oh, I see. Look at the data in this report.
I think if there is an overwhelming view on a particular point, one way or the other, the author of the report encapsulates that view would not be doing a very good job if they didn't highlight that data point. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right, Mike.
Deirdre, do I properly assume that there are various categories? We assemble data in various categories from the interviews of former TAs and former Wenham selectmen, other towns, all the way out to the surveys that were done electronically and at the town days thing and so forth. So it seems to me those are each separate compiled data. I don't know quite how you shuffle them together to come up with one number, so I guess my thought is to say this group of people said this, or 4 of them said this and 2 of them said that, or whatever, and people can evaluate whether that group is more or less credible than, say, another group. I mean, are the former selectmen more credible than the former TAs, for example, or something? I mean, for me, that would be critical to be able to look at the different things, to sort of see, which different perspectives had which opinions.
Yeah, it's just a little tricky because in certain categories you don't have too many respondents, right? So on the survey itself is the easiest, of course. The former select board members, that's probably doable. I think there's enough of the ones that we've had, probably. The TAs, I think there were 3 out of however many we've had. It's harder to draw conclusions out of 3. I mean, like, say this group believes this when there's only 3. So it's a little bit tricky. And the towns, we only really had 2 comparators, Hamilton and Groveland. So that's also a little tricky. You can't say like half of the towns said.
No, but I don't think you have to apologize. And we certainly set a broad net. We invited lots of people. People followed up with other people and so forth. It's not, shall we say, it wasn't at the top of people's list to respond. But I mean, we did speak to 2 other towns, former selectmen, and a handful. I forget exactly how many. I did 2 of our former selectmen, and I'm sure I think others did others of that group. And so anyway, I just think even if there's only 3 TAs or something, they're a relevant group. If they all think one thing, that means more than if 2 of them think one and 1 thinks the other. I mean, that's the whole thing. And the same is true with the selectmen. And at some point you get into the sort of vox populi, simply raising many times new considerations. Certainly when they were not in my original pro-con list, there's things that have turned up, comments that have been made that are interesting. And so I like the idea of sort of pithy quotes that that represent the spectrums of those different categories.
Right. I guess what I was trying to say is that's why I, in the presentation, aggregated the responses, because some of the categories have so few respondents that it becomes clearer when you aggregate and then count actually how many times people said, this is too small of a town to support 5. You know, if that's said 4 times, it rises to the top. So that's why I did it the way that I did it.
Well, anyway, shall we say, I'm happy to, as others have said, reserve judgment until we see the drafts. And if I have any constructive suggestions at that point in time, I'll be happy to fork them over.
Sounds good.
You just lost Mike.
Yeah.
So Kirsten, it's between, since Roger and Deirdre have, or Roger's abstaining, so, oh, Mike's back. Deirdre's got the data piece, and I guess you'd also be welcome to write the majority view. But the show would be the 3 of us and Dave Anderson.
I'm a really good editor and copy editor.
You are.
and trained as that. So I'm happy to do that for the whole report, make sure it all makes sense and flows. And I'd rather do that than any one particular section, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll vouch for her skills too.
Yep, excellent. I
mean,
Patrick, I think we all know who should be writing the majority report, at least the first draft.
maybe
And as a person who's not part of the majority, I think the writing is on the wall here.
I do like how Mr. Henderson he spoke very eloquently at the last meeting when he came by. So I'm happy to take on the first draft. So yeah.
And likewise, Patrick, I'll be happy to take on the minority draft when the time comes.
Oh, Harriet is in the waiting room. There she comes.
Patrick, I'm happy to work on that with you also.
Great. What I was thinking, by OML standards, is it permissible to keep a document in the shared drive and work from it? And we can all work off the same documents?
Well, it's accessible to the public.
Certainly is.
I think the question is whether going in and editing another member of the committee's work products is deliberative.
Yeah.
I see an argument that it would be. This might be a question that has to be posed to town council.
Unsolicited, Roger, I would agree.
Yeah, and I think I'm thinking back to past efforts to evaluate prior town administrators, annual reviews, and it's incredibly difficult to come up with a writing that is useful from a diagnostic point of view and not caustic from a public point of view. I mean, it's virtually impossible. So I think Ryan's exactly right. We need to have town council's advice as to how, once there is a draft of all the pieces of this thing, how can the committee assemble a collective edit to that and arrive at a document which then would be voted? But you can't vote it until it exists, and it can't exist unless you can communicate about it. And it seems to me it would be a really long, tedious meeting if we had 6 sets of copy edits being read out, and then we argue about whether it should be and or the. Harriet says
edit them at the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could still use the Google Drive and live edit function. It's just that I think it does, unless town council says otherwise, I think it has to be done during an open meeting.
So we do a draft, and we call the next meeting, and we all have the same draft, and we go around the table and comment, suggest edits or whatever. And there is the open deliberation, and it arrives at the next version of the working draft for further comment at the next meeting. Isn't that somewhat the pathway?
Sounds
That's what
like
we
it would
did for
work.
the interim report.
So whoever's writing the report would save a copy prior to the meeting. No live edits, no edits until meeting, and then we live edit on screen.
Right. Something like that.
Except it's going to be an extensively long meeting. I mean, the report's going to be much more substantial than anything we've live edited before, and probably with more substantial comments. I don't know if Ryan or someone can figure out if there's any other way to just create some efficiency, sending comments directly to the author section prior so that they can consider it. I don't know. But I'm not sure we're going to be done on time.
Right.
Well, keep in mind that the report doesn't need to be more than 5 or 6 pages. The public doesn't want 20 pages.
If I could, I mean, one suggestion, and this is something I might want to affirm with town council, but say if Patrick is the chair, were to send out an initial draft, feedback was provided to him absent there being any deliberation, but basically everybody is providing their input to him separately. Patrick could then take those pieces that were provided independently and then incorporate it into the final document. Everybody's, you're right. I mean, we're starting to deliberate about the right word choice and things like that. It could get a bit challenging, but as long as that, it's a tricky thing to do. But again, I can. Generally speaking, for the things that I have, I usually say, okay, can you provide some feedback so that it's not being seen among everybody, so that it's not being, it isn't influencing anything. So that's another thought. But I think where I don't do this, where this doesn't happen all the time, I think we could also check with town council on that perspective. So it's tough.
Yeah, that would be good.
Assuming that that's not possible, which I hope certainly it is, because that certainly would streamline the process. Assuming it's not, then we might have to just consider basically, a workshop style meeting, probably on a Saturday. I know everyone hates that idea, but where we can spend however long it would take. But hopefully Ryan is right.
Yeah.
I'll check on that. We'll report back. But it does. This is the hard part of the open meeting law process. So I just want to abide by it and follow the rules.
That's good. And we have Harriet doing gymnastics down there. You're sideways, Harriet.
You're muted, Harriet.
You're still muted. So the report that you sent me, Harriet, is in the drive. Everyone has access. We've discussed the report and report format. Roger will be taking on the preamble, the history. Deirdre's got the data collection methods and results. I will take on the first draft of the majority report, and Mike and yourself will do minority report. And we'll try not to make it 20 pages. And then also, just a few, Harriet, Ryan did found a select board minutes from 2002 where the elected officials were prohibited from taking benefits. And we're just trying to find out if that is still in force. And I will share that document on the shared drive as well.
Actually, Trudy, Patrick, I want to give due credit there. She was the one that found that. So Harriet's recollection on that topic was spot on.
Oh, excellent. I thought Trudy was too busy counting select board members going back to 1912. I don't think
So
she
if
liked that suggestion.
You can multitask.
Yeah. Patrick, if I understand you correctly, then the town of Wenham prohibits people getting health insurance unless they're 20-hour plus employees, i.e. selectmen do not qualify. The Massachusetts rule that has come into place more recently, does that overrule the town? Do we still have a problem? Or is our town ordinance sufficient to block this $27,000 a person problem?
Patrick, if I could try to answer that, I think that's what we're trying to determine, Mike, on whether or not the vote that was taken, it was back in 2001, is still relevant. Just as I'm going to be, I think in our earlier question, we'll send that other question to town council as well. But I think what the vote represents is a recognition of the fact that those baseline that baseline exists, that select board members could take advantage of that, but then the vote is an explicit direction to say that they are not going to want to allow that to happen. So I think that's how the statute was written, and I think we would be in compliance with it. But again, I want to make sure and affirm that with the attorneys.
Yeah, because we don't want to make the case that there's $100,000 problem here when there isn't.
Right, and that's what this would do. That's what.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And the Division of Local Services has said that this is an acceptable way to avoid paying death benefits. You can do it through policy bylaws, or remove stipends. So they did recognize this as an acceptable method to exempt people from benefits. Good.
It's funny what you come across when you're on the search for data and this and that. Next thing you know, you turn over a rock and there's a bunch of health insurance underneath it.
Yeah. All right. Anything else people want to discuss tonight?
Schedule for all of this? We need some
What's that?
deadlines. We need some deadlines, right?
Well, we have our next meeting is on Thursday, next Thursday. We want to try to have at least rough drafts ready, or formats ready. Is that enough time?
I mean, I feel like we need something before Thanksgiving, right? That's in pretty decent shape.
So does it make sense to have something? It does, of course, doesn't have to be in final format, but at least a working document ready for discussion at next week's meeting.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, and that's the 15th of 15 November. 18. Sorry, 18 November. Thank you. Yeah, I'll have a draft, or Harriet and I will have a draft.
Yes, the 18th. Yep, I'll have something ready. Roger,
may I ask, Patrick, what do you see beyond that date? How do you see dates going into December?
So we have Thanksgiving the week after. So
yeah.
I'm thinking we should probably get together the first week of December.
The second?
I would suggest a second, yes.
7 p.m. on Thursday, the 2nd of December?
Yep.
Okay,
We've got those first 3 weeks before we hit Christmas.
yep.
I don't know if we want to meet every week. Probably should, because we're coming up. What did we promise in our timeline? Yeah, we're right here.
Something is due to someone, i.e. the committee approved draft or something goes to the select board, what, in early January?
We said at the end of January was to have the final report.
Final,
draft,
okay.
Draft report by 12/1, so 12/2. We'll publish the draft. Everything's published anyway because it's all on shared drives. When we talked about another public forum to discuss our report, and then to give the recommendation to the select board at the very end of January. And then a presentation to the select board by February 15th. And that leaves time to get on the warrant and everything else. So I think time grows short, but we're on schedule.
So is that roadmap with dates located in one of the files on the website in the Google Docs?
Yes, this is in the.
What is the title of that one? What's the date that you're reading from?
It's TGSC _ roadmap _ 2021 06 28.
Okay.
And it's right in the front page. So
Yep.
go to the TGSC, it's right there.
So-
And then, go ahead.
Sorry, it just occurred to me, so in our report, would we want to have recommended language for the warrant and for the town meeting? At least as an addendum or something, so it's like, bam, easy to approve, easy to move forward.
I believe so. I would say yes. And also, how about implementation? Should that be in there as well? Options for implementation, if we're to get there. That way, it's just less work to do on the back end. And we've already pretty much laid out what the implementation could look like.
Yeah, I think that's wise, just to spell it out, what we're talking about.
We need to make sure that the roadmap of state approval, select board, town meeting, etc., that's reduced to one page, not 6 pages of lawyer talk, just one page. The citizens don't have the interest in this. We got to make it simple.
Yeah. I have a draft, and I have some comments from Harriet on it. But it is a one pager that says this what has to happen. I just have to go back and look at the KP memo again to see this business about the ballot, which I think is recommended but not required. But I need to see how to put that in. But it'll be, requires an act of the legislature. To get to the legislature, we have to do A, B, C, D. And then if we do that, then within 64 days or whatever that is, there's an election. So, I mean, it's a pretty simple to understand thing. And somebody can hold on to the, we can have Lauren come and hold on to the KNP memo and answer any detailed questions that come up at town meeting.
And many towns.
So I will turn that list and try to get it, Patrick, to you, and you could share it with everybody else.
Sure. And many other towns don't go back to the ballot for this. Hamilton did this without a ballot vote. And I do feel like even the straw poll we took at town meeting shows a deliberative process. So I think the ballot vote on KP's part and on DLS's part is more of a CYA.
Lawyer CYA. I agree with that. I omitted that in my initial draft. And then when the issue was bounced back up again, I said I need to double check that again. But push come to shove, Ryan can run that draft by Lauren, and she can add it if she thinks or convinces us that we should do it. But otherwise, I'm in favor of keeping it as simple as things have been done in the past.
Because if you were to combine a ballot vote with the potential increasing the number of candidates, putting the candidates out there, if this vote passes, then these candidates are viable. If this vote fails, then this is moot. Becomes very confusing at the ballot.
I tend to agree with that, and my advice always is, we'll see what Lauren says, is you have to give the selectmen a certain amount of operating authority to make decisions. There's going to be details we didn't think of that are going to have to either pick A or B, and they need to be deputized to do in their judgment to carry out the purpose, the intent of the meeting, and you just have to trust them to be competent. And in this matter, where you have Lauren, who's the world expert on this stuff, I mean, it's going to get done right.
Anything that people would want to see on the next agenda? Review drafts. Continue deliberations.
Let's review the drafts is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And pin down.
That's a whole meeting group.
Right. And pin down the schedule of meetings for the next 2 months.
Should we continue on? So we've got the second. So we have next week, next Thursday. We're off till the 2nd. Do we want to schedule for the 9th and the 16th as well? For those next 2 Thursdays?
One or the other?
I'm fine with that. Do people think we need weekly meetings, or is bi-weekly fine at that point?
I'm sort of inclined to the view that if the 4 valiant draftsmen actually produce drafts by next week, it's going to fall together pretty quickly, because, unless you'll do a final vote at some point in time to see if anybody changed their mind, but failing that, it's really just wordsmithing to get that in. Patrick, let me just say this. I'm going off to an off the grid retreat next week, so I will not be able to tune in on the 18th, but I'll pop back up with a smile on the 2nd.
Good. I hope it's someplace fun.
And
So
I have a conflict on the 9th, but the 16th is fine.
The 16th. Okay. Let's hope. So we'll tentatively schedule for the 16th, and then we'll see how next week's meeting goes, and the 2nd, and take it from there. Anything else? You muted, Mike.
Sorry. The next meeting is the 18th
Is the 18th? Yes.
of November.
Yep.
And then
12/2.
and then 2 December.
Yes.
And anything after that in December?
We're going to shoot for the 16th.
Right. Okay. And then something in January.
Yes, and we'll have a public forum again in January as well, where we
Yep.
do the talking.
Very good.
Excellent. Anything else?
So, productive meeting tonight.
Anyone want to make a motion?
You don't want to stay here all night, Patrick? I make a motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second,
Roger,
yes.
Paul. Oh, excuse me, Paul. You
I don't get to vote.
There's no one on my screen. Deirdre,
Yes.
Kirsten,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Harriet. I think she said yes. I'm a yes as well.
Yes.
Excellent.
Well done.
Nice to hear you, Harriet.
Yeah.
You get the last word, Harriet.
There you go. Unaccustomed as you are.
Paxful Biscom.
Take care, all.
See
Goodbye,
everybody in
everyone.
2 weeks or something, whatever it is.